So, how important are electric vehicles to the powers that be? Manufacturers, government agencies, other influential parties have a stake in how electric vehicles are going to be ubiquitous or more highly used in the marketplace. You've heard about electric vehicles, you know they're available, everybody knows about Tesla. Even if you don't have an electric vehicle or have never owned one, you know that they exist. However, less than 1% of vehicles on the road are currently electric vehicles. How bad do the influential parties want them to become a higher number than that? Well, here's your answer. The federal government at the highest level, from the White House, the President of the United States, is using their war powers to make electric vehicle production, manufacturing, and implementation more common. It couldn't be more obvious than that, where electric vehicles are going to be highly promoted, suggested, incentivized. Bottom line is that everybody who's important wants these vehicles on the road. You may not want one. You may not have ever thought of owning one. But if you look at what's in the tea leaves, look at what's coming down the pipeline, you'll see that these vehicles are going to be promoted and really pushed as the way that new cars are going to be sold. So what does it mean for you as a consumer? What does it mean for you as a vehicle owner, a driver? If you currently do not have an electric vehicle, never had an electric vehicle, never thought about having an electric vehicle, you might not think it matters that electric vehicles exist. You just have a gas car and that's what you're going to have. But there are already indications, you may not have seen, but behind the scenes, that you may not have that choice in the future. In fact, in the state of California, they have a deadline. By a certain year, I believe it's 2030, there will not be any more new gas vehicles sold in the state, according to their law, their statute. Now, could that change? Maybe. Maybe they'll push it off a few more years. It doesn't matter if they push it off a few more years. If that's what they want to do, that's what's going to happen. So what happens if it's 2031 and you want to buy a car and the only thing that's out there is electric vehicles? How's that going to change your life? How's that going to change how you plan on transportation? If you know that that's happening, even if you don't like the idea, you can use that knowledge to help you today. How can you do that? Well, if you want to have a gas vehicle for the rest of your life, maybe you buy something now that you know is going to last that long. Maybe you buy something now that you don't drive as much, so it lasts longer. Maybe it's your second vehicle that's a gas vehicle. How do you plan around the purchase of electric vehicles? Well, is now the time to buy an electric vehicle? If the powers that be, the government, dealerships, manufacturers, are going to make electric vehicles a priority, then the next few years might be a lot of changes. Right now might not be the best time to buy an electric vehicle. A few reasons why. Inventories are low anyways. It's hard to find one. The electric vehicles being sold right now are early in the stages of development of electric vehicles. Some of them have ranges of 100 and 150 miles. What if electric vehicles have ranges of 2 or 3 or 4 or 500 miles in the future, and you have one that only has 100 miles range? What's that vehicle going to be worth in 2028? There was a news article yesterday where Porsche is coming out with an SUV very similar to the Porsche Cayenne, which is a high-end vehicle, very fast vehicle, that's going to be all electric, will have a range of 400 miles, and have 500 horsepower. It'll cost about the same as a current Porsche Cayenne, just shy of 100,000, right around 100,000. Which is better? Well, you might prefer gas, but if it has a 400-mile range and 500 horsepower and does 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, maybe for a person looking for a high-end SUV, that might be a desirable vehicle in 3 or 4 years. So if you had a Porsche Cayenne you purchased today that's gas, yeah, maybe there's some value in terms of classic car, historical car, but for everyday use, if all of the influential parties, government agencies, dealerships, manufacturers, infrastructure, fueling stations are all being pushed towards electric, that may be the landscape that happens. So how do you benefit from that? Well, as a consumer, a vehicle owner, maybe you plan for what your vehicle use is going to be. Maybe you plan for things like where you live, where you buy a house. Maybe you plan for having an electric vehicle charging station put into your garage, even if you don't have an electric vehicle. If you're going to do an electric upgrade for something, a new panel, maybe repairs to some wiring, if the electrician's already there, put in a charging station. It's not going to cost that much more, and it will make it easier if you buy an electric vehicle because you won't have to scramble to do it then, and it'll likely be cheaper. The other big theme word for this year and probably this decade is inflation. Something that costs $400 or $500 today for a panel might cost $2,000 or $3,000 in a few years because of materials and short supply of labor, short supply of electricians. It may seem extreme to plan for an electric vehicle right now if you don't have one and you don't want to get one. But because of this is a huge change in the landscape of transportation, personal transportation, and because of inflation and because of it's a groundswell. It's not like a new model of a Toyota Camry that comes out that's slightly different from the last year. This is a brand new technology and a brand new way that people travel. Now, one of the things to plan for is recharging. The range of vehicles is getting better. Ranges of vehicles are now in 250, sometimes 300 miles as a range for an electric vehicle. That's still less than a tank of gas. If you have a 20-gallon gas tank and you get 25 miles per gallon, you have 500 miles of range. Maybe if you have a 25-gallon gas tank and get 25, you might have 600 miles of range. Anywhere between 450, 500, 600. That's normally the range of most vehicles on gas. So if you have an electric vehicle that has 250 or 300, yeah, it's less, but it's in the ballpark. Very rarely do you drive 500 miles full stop without having to stop anyways. Most people drive 40, 50 miles to work, 40, 50 miles home, run some errands. So it's not like you're not stopped every 70, 80, 100 miles. The problem comes in is the charging time, the refueling time. Currently, if you are getting low on gas, you have a quarter tank, you pull off the highway, pull into a gas station, spend 3 minutes filling up, you're on your way. You got a full tank of gas, another 400, 500 miles. With electric vehicle charging, you pull off the highway, find a charging station, which there's not going to be 3 of them on every highway. Think about now when you're driving down the highway or a main road. You come to a main intersection or a corner, there could be 4 gas stations, one on every corner. Each gas station has 8 or 9 pumps. Some of the large fueling stations have 30 pumps. Pull in, pull up to a pump, 3 minutes, boom, you're on your way. Electric vehicle, even in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years, there's not going to be a gas station every time you throw a rock and you can't miss a gas station. They're going to be spread out farther. Sure, you'll be able to find one. But when you get there, there might only be 2 or 3 charging stations. What if somebody's in the station? You got to wait. Even if it's open, it's not 3 minutes to fill up your tank. It might be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour to completely fill up your battery, to recharge your battery. How's that going to change your travel? First of all, it costs you time. Right? 3 minutes to 40 minutes. That's an extra half an hour plus of your travel time. Okay? The bigger problem is, what are you going to do during that time? The charging station might be near something you'd want to visit anyway. Maybe a store, maybe a restaurant, maybe entertainment. Might be near something. If it's not, you have to sit in your car for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. What if there's other people with you in the car? You're going to sit in the car for 30 minutes with other people. What if you have pets? You have to run air conditioning or heating. You can't leave them in the car if you want to go to a store. There's a lot of practical considerations for that charging duration. The range anxiety, which has been talked about with electric vehicles, that will handle itself. The ranges will get to be where they're equal or close enough to the range on a gas vehicle. The cost of an electric vehicle versus gas, that will handle itself with incentives and rebates and discounts. The biggest thing is going to be the waiting time for charging. People are going to really plan their charging intervals to happen either at home before they leave or at their destination when they're going to stop anyways. Charging en route is going to be less desirable. Think about it. If you went to a gas station today to fill up your gas vehicle with unleaded gas or premium gas, how would you feel if you had to sit there for half an hour or an hour at the gas station? Nobody likes gas stations anyways. You don't want to sit there for half an hour. Electric vehicle charging stations are the same thing. At the moment, they're not designed to be desirable places to hang out for an hour. So how are you going to plan for that? Well, it may not happen that often. Maybe it only happens once a month where you have to wait, where the timing of your trip and the distance and the destination don't line up. So maybe it's something where you bring entertainment. You bring your laptop, you bring a tablet, and you deal with that accordingly. Another factor that may or may not be of interest is personal security. When you're at a gas station, you fill up, you're on your way, 2-3 minutes. You're not at risk of being stopped in a stationary place for that long. When you're plugged in to a charger for 45 minutes, it could be a crime risk. People know that are bad guys that somebody's going to be stopped there for an hour. And you're not going to go anywhere for an hour. You have to consider that factor as well. It may not be the case everywhere you go, but it's just one more thing to add on to the list of considerations. It doesn't matter if you like electric vehicles or not, or if you prefer gas or electric. Over the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be a reality that electric vehicles are going to be more pushed upon the driving public. It's going to be more of a desirable option made by those offering the options. How you deal with that as a consumer, it's going to be important. How you plan for life around that's going to be important. Maybe, like I said, you want to get an extra gas vehicle to have for certain types of trips. The other difference with gas versus electric is it's much easier to top off or fix an out of gas scenario. If you're driving your car on a road and you run out of gas, you call AAA. AAA comes out with a gas can, puts a gallon or two in, gets you on your way to a gas station. What happens if you run out of gas with an electric vehicle? You run out of charge. Who's going to come out and you can't top off quick? Maybe there will be rescue vehicles that have a charger that can charge you, but how long is that going to take? 20 minutes, 30 minutes? Waiting time while it's charging? These are all important factors. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. So it's not like our opinion or your opinion or anybody's opinion is going to have an effect on what happens. manufacturers have already gone past a point of no return for manufacturing electric vehicles. In fact, some major U.S. manufacturers have stopped new development of gasoline vehicle technology. It doesn't mean they stopped making gas cars, but they stopped developing new engines, new transmissions for gas cars, which means that they're just going to run out the clock on the type of vehicles they already have. And when those get old or those get where they're not desirable anymore, they're just going to only have electric. It takes a development cycle of 5 to 6 years to develop new technology, a new engine, between testing and engineering and manufacturing and tooling. And they stopped doing that new development 2 or 3 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago, depending on the manufacturer. So they already kind of jumped off the cliff, so to speak, of making new gas cars. It would almost be impossible to go back to developing new gasoline vehicles for manufacturers. They're past the point of no return. Can't go back to that. They'll still have gas cars for a while, and there may always be some options for liquid fuel vehicles, but they're not to the point where they can make that the majority of what they manufacture. And there's going to come a day where you go into a dealership and all they're going to have is electric vehicles, maybe a few used ones that are gasoline. But mark this video down. At some point, it could be 2028, 2030, 2032, there will be a federal government program for cash for gassers. Remember they had cash for clunkers back in 2002? Where any old car you had, the government gave you $2-3 for, even if it didn't run. They're going to go to something where any gas vehicles on the road, they're going to come up with a dollar amount. It could be $5,000, $10,000, whatever, just to get that car off the road and crush it so it doesn't keep getting sold from one person to another and keep it on the road. It'll happen at some point to try to accelerate electric vehicle adoption. And without new vehicles being sold, the used car market gradually becoming less and less as cars come off the road, get old, break down for good, get crushed, and all you can have is electric. Maybe the technology and the systems get to be where it's more advantageous. It's better. Everybody likes it more. That may happen. But in this transition period, it's important as a consumer and as a driver to plan for how you're going to work this into your life. And don't completely expect that all of this, the issues or the difficulties will be handled or considered by the manufacturers and the government. There's going to be some rough spots you're going to have to get through. So if you have the opportunity, put a charging station at your house, get ready for that. Start to look at the technology. Start to look at the vehicles. Even if you don't want to buy one for a couple years, start to see what manufacturers are doing things with different types of batteries, different types of charging. Look at used vehicles, which ones are lasting longer, which batteries have higher lifespans. That way you can implement your knowledge as a smart consumer. Again, this channel is about smart business people, smart consumers. You have more knowledge than most people do because you're paying attention to details. And if you can do that in the area of transportation, which is the second most important thing in our life. The first is a roof over our head. The second is how we get from A to B. And if you can have knowledge of that market, you'll be able to make smarter decisions than the average person who might just be along for the ride and be kind of like following rather than leading in terms of making smart financial decisions.